Hello and welcome to Film Kid Asks, the podcast where I ask questions to working professionals in the film industry from the perspective of someone just getting started. My name is Jordan, and today I'm joined by Mairzee Almas, a director who's worked on projects like Jessica Jones, Shadow and Bone, Locke Key, and Outlander, just to name a few of her impressive credits. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Mairzee.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, you studied film in the foundation program at Vancouver Film School. How was your schooling experience?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But remembering that or knowing that I started in the industry as an actor, I went to theater school. I was trying to get work as an actor. I had been on a few commercials and done a few of those kind of things and saw the camera as opposed to all the theater work I'd been doing. And it was like seeing the camera and like, what is going on behind the scenes there? This looks so interesting. And one of the commercials I was on, I knew one of the grips. He was a buddy of my brother's. And I asked him, what is going on? What's with this? What is this film industry? What is this? What exactly does this? I mean, I love movies, but I had never really seen it from behind the scenes. Anyway, I started PAing and I worked in commercials as a production assistant. I went back to the Vancouver Film School because I was really having a hard time getting out of the production office to get to the floor. And I really just wanted to get to the floor. But back in those days, it was pretty hard. There weren't a lot of women. If you could answer the phone civilly and put together a purchase order, you were pretty much stuck in the office. And for someone who didn't want to be there, that was really tough. So anyway, I went to the Vancouver Film School, knowing that I really wanted to just get on the floor. I wanted to be part of the filmmaking process on the floor, not so much the administrative side. Um, and that's so I already had a focus and a goal in mind. I found it incredibly helpful. I loved every minute of it. And I still have good friends of mine that I met through the film school, buddies that I've worked with. And on Smallville, there was Scott Graham and Jay Marchant and myself. We were all Vancouver Film School grads. Those guys are now big, producers. I think Scott's been on Riverdale, and Jay has been doing Batwoman, and he did all the 100s. And they're both really terrific fellows. Anyway, I found it very helpful. It didn't focus too much on the humanities. It did a little bit of that, but it was really a very hands-on. This is what to expect. The film industry is really one of the last apprenticeship industries when we're talking about the technicians on the floor. And it was basically, here are the parameters that you need and some small skills that you need to get out and then be on the floor and start working your way through it. It also supported those of us with a creative artistic desire and gave us a lot of great tools to, whether it was editing or screenwriting or directing, and some of those great building blocks to then go out and be in a professional industry. So it really was focused on working in the industry versus just the humanities and the aesthetics. And I appreciated that. I loved it. Loved every minute of it. Loved all my instructors. Loved everybody. Loved the crew. Loved my conspirators. It was fabulous.
That's fantastic to hear. So then you did mention that you worked as a PA, but after film school, you started ADing. So I'm kind of curious how that was and if that has helped you as in your
Oh,
role as a director.
immensely. So as I stated earlier, I started in the office as a production assistant in the office. So understanding the workflow and how things moved through the administrative side, then getting onto the floor, the set, and working as a production assistant, firstly for the locations department. And that is sort of the beginner entry level where you're standing alone in a parking lot for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And then as you get a little more experience, a little more seniority, you sort of get closer and closer to camera, you know. And so then I was an AD production assistant, and then I was an AD, and I moved pretty rapidly through the ranks of AD. I was a second AD for many years, but to get to a second AD, and that was mostly because I think I had been in the office and I understood the workflow. So when I was on the floor as an AD, I really understood where the information had to flow, how it had to flow, what our big picture idea was for on set. So then as I became an AD, that also helped me. I always wanted to be a director, but I really didn't know any female directors. And I just really enjoyed being part of the filmmaking process. So when I did become an AD, a second AD, and then eventually a first AD, and I was a first AD for many years, many years, I worked with many directors, I think almost 200 different directors in my career. And they were almost all men. I think I worked with three women, three women during that time. Think about that for a second, hundreds, two, three women. Anyway, I told them I want to be a director. I am interested in being a director. And I realized that when I would watch, when as a first AD, when I would watch directors during our prep and I would manage our prep, I realized that really what I was witnessing was the director was prepping all the other departments and themselves to a small degree, but really they were prepping everybody else. They were prepping the art department, they were prepping the stunts, the special effects, but I wasn't seeing how the director came to their process and how they came to decide this is how I want to cover the scene, this is how I want to shoot the scene, here's the reason behind my lens choices or the camera mode choice. And so I worked with a lot of directors that were from out of town in Vancouver, and they were almost all American directors, British directors, and so they were staying in a hotel, and I would say, hey, I have a car. I would love to on Saturday drive out to the location and work with you on your shot listing if you'd like. I'm available. And they would say, oh, Mairzee, for God's sake, you've got a Saturday, take it. No, I really want to learn. And if you'll teach me, I would happily go out there. And so I did a lot of that. I spent a lot of time playing out the role, for director as he worked out the shots, and learned a ton from that process. That was very, special time to sit there and really pick the director's brain or just listen and just hear and witness how they came to their rationale behind how they were going to design a scene. And that has served me immensely. Also, from an AD perspective, understanding if you come up through the crew, that was my path. It was a long path, I have to admit. And for a lot of other people, they can kind of come in from the side. And I see value there as well. Having come up from underneath it, I have a very strong idea of the process for everyone. I feel like I'm in a really great place to help empower all of the various departments in doing their very best work because I understand their limitations and I understand their inspirations. So I find personally my approach is I'm a collaborative artist and I want departments to bring their level best. And you can only really do that if you understand the bigger view of things. I mean, one of the things I would tell my young ADs when they were starting is that, especially when you're a trainee on the set, you've got a to-do list in front of you and you're checking off all the boxes. And that's your job. That's a big part of your job. But it's really important to see yourself beyond that and look outside of that and say, what are we doing? We're trying to get a performance on film or ones and zeros, whatever it is nowadays. We are trying to get a performance and tell a story in a compelling way. So really, the only thing that really matters is what the camera is seeing. And, where the craft service is or where the truck is parked or where all of the various logistics should not be driving the prize. And the prize is what we see in the lens. That's the most important thing. And when you come up from underneath, you have to be mindful of that, to not become overwhelmed with the minutia of your particular job It really is not about whatever the dyeing of a certain piece of wardrobe or something. I mean, they all help towards it, but really it's about this, it's really about that. So I think coming up through the bottom, that helped me a lot. It also gave me a ton of confidence. And as a first AD, obviously very comfortable on set, understand everyone's jobs to some degree, and can help support them to do their best work.
That's so awesome. I feel like there's so much fantastic advice in there already. And it's interesting because everyone kind of has a different path through the industry. But one thing that is very consistent is the people who are very successful are the people who kind of go above and beyond and aren't just doing, the things on the checklist. So I think that's awesome to hear. And you actually kind of segue perfectly into my next question, which is now we're kind of moving into your work as a director. And I'd love to hear about prep and what is, because obviously it's such an important part of the process. What's your favorite part of prep?
Oh my goodness. Well, firstly, I really do love all of it. When I get the script initially, I spend quite a lot of time on what I would call like script analysis. Basically, what that is from the big macro looking at the script, whether it's an episodic, one episode or a whole season, having an understanding of what are some themes that you're exploring in the material, what are some metaphors that we have, and for me personally, especially when I come into a first season show, that's my preference, when you're still able to be a big part of the creative birth of the show. And I will look at it with the big macro in mind. I will read my script, maybe read all the scripts for the first season, depending on where I am. But I tend to read everything or watch the cuts, watch everything. And my first question is, for example, if I'm doing a finale, which I'm doing right now, I want to know how my main characters are different here at the end than they were from the very, very beginning. And then I want to know for each episode I'm doing, again, how is the character different at the end than they were from the beginning of the episode? And you can actually break that into micro per scene. What has changed them in each scene? What's different? And then once you start understanding there is a difference at the end than there was at the beginning, whether it's the scene, the script, or the season, then you can start looking for pivots or moments of choice where your character had an opportunity to make a choice and they choose this way. And those are the moments that I love to harvest. Those are the moments where you see the character has a breath. They can either go this way or they're going to go that way. And I think we as an audience, that's what we like to watch. We don't, and you find this in the editing as well. Sometimes the editor, for brevity, because we need to move quickly and we don't have enough real estate in the episode to really spend a ton of time on stuff, is that editors will sometimes they'll cut to the person already in that emotion. And you'll see them in reaction. Somebody says something and you see them kind of going, I'm mad, as opposed to seeing the moment where they shifted from neutral to mad. And those emotional gear changes are the things that I'm most interested in. I will oftentimes in the edit process, after we've shot everything, I'll go through with the editor and we'll back up things, and the cut will suddenly get really long because I want all those pre moments, and then we'll back it up a little bit to include all of those moments. And to me, those are the most exciting beats, when the audience is not sure, what is this character going to do? Are they going to go left? Are they going to go right? Are they going to blow up? Are they going to, simmer? What's going to happen? And those are emotional moments. And what's really exciting about that is, as a director, you are not asking the characters or the actors to chart an emotional journey. You're not asking for an emotional response. You really have to, and this is a hard thing for a lot of first time directors, you cannot, nor should you try to curate the actor's emotional response. You really need to say, I'm not going to do that. For example, it's the great analogy I would have is your emotions are like a river full of different colors, different emotions, and they're sort of flowing along. And just like the Zen parable that you can never stick your foot in the same river twice, that is the same for an actor in a scene. And what might happen sometimes is the actor really has a big emotional experience in the scene, and they're like, "Oh my, I have to recapture that." And it now becomes really dishonest. And or there becomes a layer between us because now you're pursuing an emotional objective where that's not a real that's not what people do. What people do is they have an objective they pursue, and they are acutely tied into the person they're trying to get that objective from. And they're watching that person. Am I getting closer? Am I getting further? And they also have an idea of how big the stakes are. So it's really, I mean, this is super simplifying it, but it's what do I want and how much do I want it? And that's what you're doing, not I need to cry here. I need to, have a big explosion of rage. That's not true. And we should not pursue that. So for me, what's exciting is breaking down the script, really understanding what do these characters need from each other, how much do they need it, what other elements are putting a clock on this situation or raising the stakes or creating the confines for the characters that they are now working within that may amp up their emotional presence for sure, but not dictating any emotional experience at all. And so that's super exciting. And when I know what their journeys are, when I have a really good strong sense of it, I will talk to the actors about what they think is their journey and where they think they have some big moment pivots. And honestly, as a director, I don't need to agree with that moment. It's okay if they have a different idea. I just want to know what it is so I can point the camera at it. For me as a director, I'm always trying to block for and design camera for the subtext of a scene, not the text of a scene, the subtext. You cannot do that if you do not understand your script. So the most exciting and the funnest part for me is when there are no limitations whatsoever. We have no parameters whatsoever. Everything, I have a magic wand at this point, and I'm just reading the script and I'm understanding what all the characters are doing. And then after I've read it a couple of times, I will literally just read, like I'll pick the number one character, and I will just read their scenes and make sure that there is a journey and that there are pivots in that journey. And number two, number three, number four, like and I will go through the main characters. And so I really understand their individual journeys and make sure that there are pivot moments there where we can capture those on camera. And then when I'm talking to the actors, we'll go through it and kind of collaborate on when we think some of the bigger moments are, or
Yeah.
big pivots, big decisions.
Well, you kind of already answered some of my questions that I had about you working with actors through this. But now I'm kind of curious how that plays out when working with the writers, because I know obviously you're stepping into a TV show that will have, already episodes written, and your episode, I am assuming, will be pretty much the first draft or a couple drafts in will have been written by the time that you start your prep
Yeah.
and working on it. So how does that
Mhm.
relationship look like when you're looking for those pivot points? Is that something that you work with the writers to, exaggerate those and
Yeah.
make sure that there is a character arc? And what does that look like, I guess, before you start shooting?
Well, you're exactly right. We do. It is absolutely a collaboration with the writers. The writers have an intention. Sometimes there are a lot of drafts that have occurred before I even look at it. And those are the ones where as a director, I am particularly careful with plotting because what can happen through no one's fault is so many eyes have looked at the draft and they have adjusted it for a whole bunch of really valid reasons. Then I look at it and I say, okay, the character starts here and the character ends here. And there are some really important pivots, or one very, very important pivot that no longer happens on camera. It seems to have been omitted. And all of the writers and the writing staff and the showrunners and the producers before me remember the scene they can remember it. So they think it's still there. And they think, no, there's that moment when she makes this choice. And I'm like, no, that scene is gone. And they're like, oh my God, how did that go? Well, it went because oftentimes our scripts are pursuing a plot, of course. And this particular scene was omitted because it didn't drive the plot forward. And it was just a character moment. I'll come back and go, wait a minute. We have to, this whole major decision from this character now is happening off screen. Is there any way to trowel that back in somewhere, whether it's put the scene back or put that bit back in an existing scene? And that has happened to me on several occasions. And it's really just because sometimes there's just a lot of revisions that have had to happen for logistical reasons, for a whole bunch of really, really, really valid reasons. And this little orphan gets left aside. So it is doubly important, even when you have an incredibly talented writing staff and really good producers that have their eye on the ball, because their memory remembers the scene. Now they have a faulty memory, and it's important for these new eyes to come in and look at it with those new eyes and say, hey, this is where this is what's happened now. And that's really also just understanding some really good skills and strategies in script analysis, and taking that part of your craft and having discipline around it.
Yeah, no, fresh eyes can be so valuable. Even
Mhm.
even if the project is great and there's been so many conversations, I know fresh eyes can see things that you've missed because you're so deep in it.
Mhm.
But you kind of talked about plot, and a lot of the work that you do is quite high concept, sci-fi, fantasy, that kind of television. So what draws you to those types of stories? Because I know, obviously, speaking with you, character is huge and emotional arcs are huge. So sometimes, in TV, I find that the plot can sometimes drive it. So I'm curious. I'm curious why you tend to do mostly sci-fi and fantasy.
I love how high the stakes can be, firstly. So it creates an environment with extreme possibility. I also think that special effects and that kind of fantasy stuff just allows us to really have a cinematic experience. So I love that too. First and foremost, I really my biggest priority is the performance. I have had that kind of question before. It's like, Mairzee, my God, you're so driven about performance and the honesty of the actor. And yet I'm not doing just these straight dramas. And it's because I think that in sci-fi and high concept stuff, the stakes are just so much greater. And the potential for uh, really fantastic performances from great actors with these extreme situations is terrific. And sometimes some people or some shows I have witnessed, on television, I'll watch something and I'll think, oh man, it's got great special effects. It's got great stunt sequence, but the acting is shite. And you look at that and just think, oh my God, all that effort, all of that wonderful expertise from those departments, the special effects, the visual effects, the all of that exceptional expertise. And yet they didn't demand the same quality from the performances. And that to me is just a heartbreak because everything is so elevated. That should be as well. And when I watch a show, I'm captivated by the characters. Yeah, if it explodes or whatever, that's all should be supporting the story in a meaningful way. It should not be an interlude. And that kind of gets me to how I would personally approach, for example, a fight scene. As an example, it is a scene. It's a scene. It's a scene first and foremost, like any other scene. Otherwise, it is truly just an interlude. And when you have an interlude, and I find myself, I'm a fan of these things, but I watch an interlude fight. I know, especially in an episodic television where you've got your main character fighting somebody, I know he's going to win. I know he's winning. So I get up and go make a sandwich. It's a lot of noise and bluster. It's just too much to follow. I don't care. And then I'll come back or I'll fast forward through it. It's like, yeah, whatever, whatever, whatever. I don't care. And same thing with the big, a space battle or whatever. I mean, I will just fast forward through that crap if it's an interlude. If it's a scene, however, I'm riveted. So how do you make it a scene and not an interlude? Well, like any other scene, it should have a progression. It should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We should see some character reveal moments. We should learn something, even if it's our main character who we know is not going to die. But we should have some moments of character reveal. We should have some pivots where that character could have done this, but they chose this, and it was important and it was unexpected. And we never want to betray character to progress the plot, but that's not to say we shouldn't surprise the audience with a character choice. So you never want to betray character for plot, but you should still be able to surprise the audience with their choice. And it should feel like, I didn't see that coming, but it totally makes sense. And the first example that jumps to mind is Indiana Jones fighting the guy with the big sword. And then Indiana Jones is exhausted and he pulls out his gun and he shoots the guy. Hilarious. Told us all about the character. Told us that we got to see him, that character, in a wonderful way. That was not a particularly heroic action from him. In fact, it was kind of cowardly, given that the other guy didn't have a gun. But he was over it and he had to move on. So I love that kind of a thing where you have a moment where you get to see the character. I will always approach a fight as a scene. And if I ever feel like it's turning into just an interlude with a bunch of bashing and swords whacking over each other's head, we're going in the wrong direction. And the other thing I will always say to my stunt people, my stunt coordinator, when we're designing the fights, is that, especially when we're talking about a fight, and it could be a sword fight, it could be a laser gun battle, whatever, every blow is meant to end the fight. No one is going into a fight thinking, okay, now we're going to have this nice little boxing match. They're not. This guy comes out from nowhere. This guy tries to get rid of him. And so their action is meant to end it. And every time it doesn't end it is another, oh my God, what now? What? Oh, here's the lamp. Crash. Damn it, that didn't work. And, they're trying to stop the fight, get away, end the fight, do something. So when you design action, special effects, stunts, all of those things, you have to keep the objectives in mind. It just suddenly inflating this huge, massive pyrotechnic thing, I find it supremely boring unless there is a way to tether it to someone's action in a way that reveals who they are or something else about the plot or about the enemy or something. So you really want it to do that. Otherwise, it's just dreadful storytelling.
Wow. You keep answering my questions before I can even ask them. That's awesome. Yeah, when you were speaking, all I could think of was the fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi in the third episode of Star Wars, where they're just hitting at each other for like 20 minutes. And you just zone out. But yeah, I think that was actually at the end there such a great thing to keep in mind, because I think a lot of the times, especially as young filmmakers, we're like, oh, it's so awesome. But no, it really is. These people are trying to end this fight as quickly as possible, and win it, obviously. So yeah, I think that's a very good reminder to keep in mind, because you're like, it's easy to get distracted by, oh, this would be so cool, this would look awesome. But story should always drive it.
Yeah. And so when
great.
you see like somebody with a sword and they're whacking it over each other's head, or, not even that gross, but everything should be meaning to like stab the guy, kill him. It's like, it should be not these wide, fancy moves unless this person has a reason for that. And there's a plot and character reason for, trying to impress this person in a way, like in Indiana Jones.
Right.
But yeah, I do see that stunts, special effects, visual effects are way more accessible now in shows. So the technology has advanced in a way that, even a smaller show can do a little bit of that. And it's important, again, even though it is more accessible, even though we can do more, you always have to bring it back down and ground it into the character and ground it into their objective and what's happening for the plot.
Yeah, of course. So I'm curious because I did ask about the sci-fi and fantasy, but I'm also curious because you work almost exclusively in television. What draws you to that format as a director?
Well, I would love to do a feature for sure. And we're kind of working on some ideas there, my team and I. But what I love about television, and especially cable television, it has a slightly different format than network television. Network television often has like a lot of episodes in one season, from 20 to 26 episodes in one season. And oftentimes in network television, there is a will to gauge the audience and sort of direct your season to how the audience is also responding. For example, if the audience really loves this little side character, suddenly that side character's got a little bit more real estate in the episodes and may in fact become a main character when they were just a little character. And so there is a little bit more interaction between the audience and the show in network, but it tends to be, not always, but it can tend to be sort of procedural, in that there is, every episode can be enjoyed on its own by itself. It has a, a who done it or whatever, and there's a little bit of character development as you go through. So there, that is, a lot of people really love that kind of work because it is a little mini, episode, has its own beginning, middle, and end in a satisfying way. People really enjoy that. I don't love that as much. I like, although I don't hate it, but I don't find it as fulfilling for me as cable. And when I say the cable stuff, it is more, I look at it as a long form movie. So it doesn't have 26 or, all those episodes. It has 8 or 6 or 10. And it may have multiple seasons, but each season it feels like it is a long form movie. And there's a lot more individual voice that can be heard in these episodes or blocks of episodes. And I really enjoy doing, 1 or 2 episodes for a cable kind of show where you get to collaborate with this overall vision of this bigger picture. You are a brick in the wall of this long form movie, and yet there's room to be a filmmaker, room to invent, and even come off of, well, oftentimes they will have some elements that they want you to, this, kind of, this is the idea of our show. We have sort of some tonal things that we want you to echo, but beyond that, often in cable, they're hiring me because I'm a filmmaker. They want you to have an independent voice. You are not just collecting coverage. You are going out there and you are interpreting this and filming it in that way. Whereas in network stuff, you can sometimes feel a little bit like you need to collect a lot of coverage, very specific kinds of coverage that will help the executives reform the show in post, or depending on what has changed with audience approval, or how they've decided to change the ending or whatever. Some very, very valid reasons why they need to manipulate it. But anyway, I prefer to work in cable, where we tend to have the entire season already written. We know exactly what it is. It's a long form movie, and I have this one piece of my pie to tell the story with.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely valid and awesome. So I'm gonna ask one more question before I hand it off to some of my classmates, but that is simply, what advice would you give to someone who is just starting their career? Maybe they're in film school, but is aspiring to be in your position one day, working, doing these Netflix shows, these streamers, and in sci-fi and fantasy. What advice would you give?
Oh my goodness. Ah, people have come into this industry from so many different perspectives. And honestly, I took a very long route because I did come from the very bottom and kind of found my way up. I do find great value in understanding all of the branches that you interact with. And I think if you are an aspiring director, take some acting classes so you understand some of the language of the actors so you can help them do their best performance. And that's really your job, is to support the actors in a way that they can do their very best work. And that is from their analysis all the way through to the last time you say cut on a scene. Your job is to support these actors, not to micromanage them, not to tell them what emotion they need to be having at this moment, but to support them in creating a performance throughout the episode or the film or the scene. You want them to create a performance. So you've got to figure out how to help your actors do that. So first and foremost, if you're a filmmaker at film school, go and take some acting classes, go and audit a class and watch some scene studies, watch the actors process so you can start to understand some of their language. The other thing I would say to an aspiring filmmaker is take some script writing courses or audit them. You need to just understand some of the structure, and so you can start to break it apart so you understand that. I always say the best networking environments are film sets. If you can get your ass on a film set as a production assistant, that is worth everything. That is as opposed to film school where you're paying them to teach you stuff, it is an apprenticeship industry. You cannot, I don't care what film school you're in, you will not learn everything. You can't. And in fact, I've been on plenty of sets where that PA that just came in with their highfalutin degree, and it's, yeah, shut up, go out in the parking lot. You got to start, you got to learn, you got to actually be here and learn it. That does not mean you have to languish there for decades. It does mean, however, get your ass on a film set as a production assistant, start paying attention to how things happen. You can ask people questions, ask the grip when you watch them putting together an insert car to drag a car around the city, and you're the AD or the PA standing at the parking lot watching the guys lighting it on a trailer and putting the camera car. Ask questions. Go up and say, hey, this is so cool. Why is the light here? Why do you have to put it on a trailer? Why can't the actor drive it? You ask questions. These guys are working. They won't stop to answer you, but people are proud of the work that they do, and they are eager to share, eager to share. And once you are on a film set, even as a production assistant, and I have witnessed this, where a young production assistant who was a film school grad asked the producers on a show I won't name if he could borrow some of the camera gear. And the producers said, well, yes, you're going to use your A camera operator was his DP. And so, yeah, you can have our entire camera package worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can use a package, and you can use our sets on the weekend. So by having a relationship with the show, this young filmmaker was able to make an award-winning short using completely professional crew, just because he was a good guy. He helped out when he could. He was just had a great relationship with everybody, and was learning and was asking questions, and had professional actors that jumped in and said, sure, I'll be there. Are you kidding? You cannot get this actor. How did you manage to get this award-winning actor to come in and do 3 lines on your movie on a Saturday? Well, they did it because they were friends. And so there's a lot of benefit and value in getting your DGA card, starting low, getting into the Permittee program, and at least getting some traction on set so you start to understand the process. Now, having said that, some people really come in from the side. They're writers. They don't need to know how the watch is made. They just want to know how to tell time. Okay, that can happen. That can happen. But even that, I'm going to say that person's ability to fully understand and utilize their resources is truncated. They are reliant on the people around them to tell them this is what we can do, as opposed to being a big part of that creative process that says, this is what I want to do. Here, I've got an idea.
Again, there was so much great advice in there. That's awesome. And that's insane that a PA got to use the camera gear and the sets. That's wild. But now I'm going to open it up to a few of my friends if they have any questions.
It was great hearing everything from you. Also, yeah, that last story was really cool. My question is, when you work on shows where you're directing like single episodes, what kind of relationship do you have with post-production? Is it just for that episode, or is it for, or do you like work with the other directors to kind of create, you know what I mean? Like,
Cohesive.
cohesive,
Yeah.
yeah, end product.
Well, oddly, that's a great question, Marissa. Great question. What generally happens if we're talking about cable, which is cable productions, where they are smaller number of episodes, the post-production is only for my episode or my block of episodes. However, the showrunner, the writer who is sort of overseeing all of them, it's usually the creator or writing showrunner, they will be the linchpin for all of them. And conversations with that person about this show and some of the language that we're developing, is a big part of it. So, for example, there may be a sound cue that really works well for this group of people. Like on Shadow and Bone, we had some sound cues whenever the crows came on, and sort of playing with that idea, and coming out of this one episode, it kind of permeated to the rest of the episodes. But in post-production, really, as a director that comes in, you're working with your episode, and you are in conversation with the showrunner about any universal themes that might benefit the other directors. And those other directors have talked to the showrunner also, who may also be passing on their thoughts. What often happens is, though, that these directors that came before me or come after me, we're spread all over the world. Somebody's in Hungary shooting, somebody else is in Germany, I'm in London, so we're all on different time zones. But our showrunner is the creative, the buck stops there, and they are in charge of the bigger creative look. And depending on who that showrunner is, they will have absorbed or dictated, depending on what kind of creative vision is happening, what the look is, what the feel is, or they'll be soliciting collaboration or kind of dictating it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I had no idea how that worked.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for that description of like fight scenes, and how, for instance, characters aren't there to want to drive the plot. They're there to want to get what it is that they want, whether it's, physical confrontation or in conversation. That was really eye-opening for me. My question for you, though, was more logistical. Like, do you tend to work in Vancouver, or whereabouts kind of is your sphere of work, and do you have to be really mobile to do what you're doing right now in episodic television?
I almost never work in Vancouver.
Okay.
Almost never. I work everywhere else in the world. I'm in Chicago right now. I'll go to New York after that, and then I'll go back to Europe. I was just in London, England.
Amazing.
So I am I am so blessed, and I travel all over the world, pandemic or no. I am traveling everywhere. So you have to be pretty mobile and very good at living out of a suitcase. One of the things that I really love about that versus being at home, obvious pros and cons, but one of the pros is that you are immersed in this job. They're big jobs, and I am given the opportunity to sort of envelop myself in the submarine of the show. And the day-to-day things of my life, I can put over here and say, I'm not going to deal with, getting the roof, whatever done, or, taking my mom somewhere, or, whatever. So you don't have to deal with your life when you're doing it. The con of that is you're not dealing with your life. So the balancing act of how much time you're on the road versus how much time you are at home, you really do have to look at that, because and I've discovered this myself, is that I can spend a year away, and I have spent a year away because of the nature of being able to immerse myself. I have ignored my life, on some level. So you do need to find the balance. It's not always in your control, or it doesn't feel like it is. And what I'm guilty of doing is, oh, I don't want to wreck this relationship, and I don't want to say no, and I don't want to do this, and what if I miss that? And oh my God, it sounds so fun, and I don't want to say goodbye to that. And so then I'll do that, and then I'll have to go, oh my God, what am I doing? I need to take some time off. I've got, my life is sort of happening over there. I need to be part of my life.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think that's a reality of film that
Yeah.
sometimes people forget.
I would love to know, do you prefer working like on built sets or on location? Because I know they can be very different and like be creative in different ways in how you work with them.
What a great question. Okay, so on Shadow and Bone, we used palaces and existing locations that you can only find in Europe, like in these beautiful old cities, where, I mean, those were exceptional sets because they were locations, they were real palaces, real places. It was like, wow. And that would be extraordinarily difficult for an art department to deliver that level of detail, that level of opulence. So if you are able to shoot in an outstanding location, then absolutely the art department is probably not going to be able to give you that level of detail. They will support it and they will add set dressing, but they won't be able to give you the bones. The bad part about it is, you can't fly a wall. The ceiling is intact. You can't get the camera in the corner because the corners, it's a sharp, you can't move it. The good part of that is it feels real. It doesn't feel fake like you pulled a wall. So there's bonuses and minuses. When you're shooting on location, generally everything, you just have that much more level of realism. So it's the more expansive, or it can be more expansive. You're on a mountain, you're in a forest versus a forested set. Years ago I worked with a bear, and we had to have, the bear was not allowed to be outside anymore. You had to shoot with the bear in a studio. So the bear had to be tethered, and we had to make a fake forest, and it felt fake, it looked fake, everything about it was fake. And we had to do that for the bear's safety, really, and for everybody else's. And that was a really great example of, oh man, you do not want to shoot a forest in a set, in a studio. But nowadays we've got blue screens, green screens, visual effects, extensions. We can do a lot in a set. There's way more control. You're not given to the weather. You can shoot day for night and night for day, and you can manipulate all of that. When you're on location, now you are at the whims of traffic, day and night, weather, a whole bunch of other elements that become of issue, lockups. You've got all of these people on the sidewalk. I shot in downtown Manhattan, and having all these looky-loos on the corner all staring at us. And, I'm trying to shoot in that direction, and it's trying to sweep the people away, and you just can't. It's like, oh man. They have their own, there's bonuses and minuses. The biggest bonus for location, real great locations, is the level of detail your art department could never deliver to you the way that you can get in an excellent location.
I think that was a great question and a great answer. Yeah, my dad worked, I don't know if you know him, I think he's represented by your agent, Grant Harvey.
Oh
Yeah,
totally
he
fun.
worked in he worked in Budapest a couple summers, and we went, and yeah, the locations were just insane. It was so cool to see. And it was a period thing as well. So, seeing everyone dressed up, it was just phenomenal. It
Phenomenal.
was really special.
I love that
Yep.
all of you people are girls. I love all the women, young women here. This is great. And I love seeing that. And I love seeing young women wanting to be filmmakers and knowing it's possible. And there's a lot more women filmmaking now. It's not like when I was, a young filmmaker and there was absolutely no one. It's great to see.
Well, it's great seeing role models like yourself working, doing the things that we want to do. It's really empowering. It's
Good.
awesome. So I am gonna wrap this up, but before I do, I ask everyone who comes on for 5 film recommendations. So
Okay.
I am gonna get you to share those with me now and why you chose them.
Okay. My first one is Booksmart, Olivia Wilde. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I loved it. I thought that is a great example of some really interesting characters. They were really empowering. It was a different take on girls. They weren't all mean girls in competition with each other. It's something, this bullshit notion, stereotype that women are always in competition with each other and they can't help each other. That it was wonderful to see a show that had these two best friends supporting each other throughout, and the acceptance of their quirkiness, and that they didn't have to be lined up exactly the same to be dear, dear friends. Loved it. Olivia Wilde knocked that out of the park. The actors were terrific. That's why I chose that. And I really just characters, wonderful performances, wonderful performances. And that was a director who was an actor. So she really understood the performance realm of it. It would be interesting to talk to her and find out how much support she got from the technical side. And did she feel she needed it, or was she pretty comfortable, or what did she do to get ready for it? That would be a really interesting thing to find out from her. My next film that I would choose for you guys would be Night of the Hunter. Charles Laughton directed that. He was another actor. And that movie was decades ahead of its time. I think at the time it came out, it was panned, but it is a magnificent film. And Robert Mitchum is a lead, and Lillian Gish plays a really great role in it. And it has been ripped off by a million other movies since, but it is well worth watching. It's Night of the Hunter. Charles Laughton directed it. You probably find it on Criterion Collection. Pacing, some of the wonderful film. There's some great shots in there that are spectacular. And he is Mitchum is really charismatic. Sophie's Choice, again, an amazing performance. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's one of Meryl Streep's earlier roles that really put her on the map. This is a great film to watch pacing and patience. And her performance had such sorrowfulness that filled it, but was a great example of how, as a performer, you can add an element that has weight, but does not totally wash everything in a way that you don't understand. How she could have a scene where she was laughing and still be able to, but we still felt a grounding in the sorrow. Really just a master class on performance. And in fact, any film, Meryl Streep, where she played Maggie Thatcher, that was another one, a master class in, performance. Sophie's Choice. Gladiator, Ridley Scott. I love it on every level. Just again, pacing, performance, everything about it. Silence of the Land, Jonathan Demme's film. That is, again, it's performance and tension. And look at that film. It's one of the best thrillers of our day. It has one stunt. And I'll leave it to you guys to figure out where that stunt is. Of course, big Lord of the Rings. If we're going to talk about design, production design, costume design, and that was a film, of course, Peter Jackson, that came from source material that was very beloved, and people were going to be watching it very carefully. So he did a masterful job on all levels, and the performances were terrific. And his mastery of visual effects and stunts and special effects was, how to bring all of those elements together to support your storytelling, as opposed to just being spectacle. We always want these things to support us and support the storytelling. And those were, so how many is that? What have I given you?
I think that was
Booksmart.
6.
Night of the Huntress, Sophie's Choice, Gladiator,
Gladiator.
Silence of the Lambs, Lord of the Rings. You're right. Okay, great. And Jaws.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Oh,
good.
and Jaws. Okay, I'll add that to the list as well. Thank you so much, Mairzee. Honestly, this was such a phenomenal interview. It was very inspiring, but also I feel like there was a lot of things that we can take with us advice-wise, whether that be industry things or storytelling things. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day
My pleasure.
to speak with us.
Yeah.
It was awesome. And thanks to those of you who asked questions. But that is all for this episode of Film Kid Asks. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram or join our Facebook group for information about upcoming guests. New episodes come out every Saturday.